Hi, I'm Owen from Square Blue, and today I'm going to talk about the CSS or SCSS or whatever you use 7-to-1 methodology, and I'm also going to talk about BEM methodology, which is a naming convention. I'm going to show you what I used to do when I first started writing CSS and how problematic that was. I'm going to talk to you about why this is great for team working, but even if you're not on a team, how this will help you working as a solo coder in the future and really enhance your projects. I'm going to show you how this improves maintainability of your projects, and I'm going to show you a little bit about some of the mistakes that people make when using this methodology. So let's get started, but please, if you like my videos, do subscribe and let me know in the comments if there's anything I can improve. So starting off, we'll talk about let's start off by telling you a story about how I started actually. Um, I started writing CSS. Everything would be in one big long file, and I would also call the CSS whatever it was. It might be box one, box two, something like that, and it would have no real um, maintainability. If I looked back in 1 year's time, I'd be like, what is box one? And I'd have to go and check the site and find box one and see what box one was. And it was a massive long file, and all my media queries were in it, and everything was there. And when the clients would inevitably say, oh, I want to change this and change that and change this, and I'd go, oh God, I don't know. Where is that code? And sometimes you'd be writing loads of stuff to get things done. So you'd end up saying, right, I need to write some new code now to make the changes, and you wouldn't be able to find the old code, or you wouldn't know if the old code was going to delete something or change something that you were unaware of. So you'd probably just leave the old CSS code there. You'd have a massive file, and lots of it would be completely unnecessary. Um, and if you came back to it in a year's time, you'd really be struggling to find things, and you'd genuinely be scared to delete things because you wasn't always sure what it does. And that is what the 7-to-1 methodology solves. Let me just show you how that works. So we've got this custom CSS file, and all it's got in it is my imports. So a long way away from when I used to have thousands of lines of code in there. And then what we've got within our imports is we've got these folders, and it's just base, utils, or utilities, vendors, layouts, components, pages, and themes. And I have put the number 1 in front of base, 2 in front of utils. And the reason I've done that is because I want them to stay in the actual order that I load them in. So if we go back to our custom CSS, you'll see that there's a specific order. Now I don't need to put the numbers there to load them in the right order, but when it comes to remembering which order they're being loaded in, it kind of helps me to have them with the folders with the numbers on them. And the order in which they load is obviously important in CSS, but I'll talk you through what each folder does. So base, this is basically my baseline style. So if I just show you what I've got in there, you'll see like I've styled strong, and I've styled the order to as a class I've made, changed the order, and there's just some other stuff in there, all of which are like I consider to be baseline things. And then utils, well, I have things like my colors in here. So if you look at this, here's my CSS variables with the colors. And as I said, it's important in which the order in which these folders come. Because I've got it as order number 2, it's in the second folder. That means all of these other folders are after it. They'll all be aware of those colors, and that means I can call these variables in all of my other files, which is great. I've also got a breakpoints CSS file. Now, if I'm using SCSS, I'm probably going to put some mix-ins in here, but as you can see, in this project, I have commented these out. However, even though I've commented them out, I've still left all of the breakpoints in there because this is a really useful document for me. When I come to write a media query in another CSS file, I can just go, right, what are my breakpoints on this project? I'll just go and look in the breakpoints file. Even though it's not really being loaded or anything, it's still exactly where I expect to find it. And if I'm another developer on my team working on this, I can also go, oh, okay, let's check breakpoints and see if there's anything in there, because I pretty much include this on every project. We've also got some other things, like this is, you might think this is a bit stupid because I've only got one class in here for the border, and this was on a lot of our pages. So if I look at case studies, you can see there's this big blue border. Now, I created a class for it just so I can add that class whenever I need it on this website because we use it in a few places. So although you might think it's overkill to have a file just for this rule, it actually means in the future when I come and look for it, I'll find a border file and go, oh, that's going to just have stuff related to the border, which makes it really, really easy for my team to understand what's in that file. They don't have to open it to know that it's about the border. So I will not have to look through every single file looking which CSS style, which file is it in, because I won't open the border if I'm looking for an image or a button styling or something like that. So moving on from that, we've got the vendors. I don't have anything here at the moment. This would be something like if you're using Bootstrap or UIKit or Zerb Foundation, you could override the styles. So for example, button primary, you might decide to override that, or media queries or whatever it is, you might decide to override the vendor styles in here. Often, as well as vendor styles, you're going to have your own styles, which then may go into layouts or components. I will tell you the difference as I see it within layouts and components. I see a layout as something that styles either an entire page or an entire page for like an entire case study page, or an entire section which contains multiple components. So in this case, the footer, as you can see, we have a footer CSS. Now, it could be a component, but I kind of see this as a layout because it contains like multiple columns and components and all sorts of things. So the footer could change tomorrow. So that's why I could add another thing into the footer. That's why the footer is a layout, because whatever I put in there shouldn't matter if I add a new component into the footer. Um, And now to talk about components. So this would be a component. So I've got my image, I've got my heading, I've got a bit of text, I've got to continue reading, and I've got a blue border at the bottom. I'll consider that component, and it's obviously repeated throughout the page on the left and right and above it and below it. I would consider this heading to be a component. It's a small part of a page. It could be a section, or it could be a card, or it could be like a mini layout basically, or even a button. I would consider this to be a component, this phone number. It's on every single page, but I would style that as a component. And so if I show you my components, so just to stick on layouts first actually. So case study single, I've got an entire document just for that. And so another really good benefit of having these things is, say the client decided me, actually we're not going to have case studies anymore. Well, in the old days, with my big long CSS file, I'd have to go and find every single reference to case studies. If I was sensible, I would keep them all in exactly the same place. When I first started writing CSS, that wouldn't be the case. I would just try and do it quickly. After a while, I started writing comments like case study starts here, case studies ends here, and in between it would be all the stuff. But in this case, I can actually just come into my index file and I could just remove the case study single. I could just comment that out, and now I'm no longer loading the entire CSS for that. I don't have to go through and find it. I don't have to look for it. And if the client ever wants it back in the future, I can just uncomment it. So I can actually leave the file there for safety's sake. And if the client changes their mind, I haven't deleted all my CSS. So it's actually almost like a mini version of version control. Version. Um, so I really love the fact that I can do this sort of stuff. And then at the end of the project, when I have finished, I can just go and check what have we commented out, and I can delete those files because we won't need them anymore. Or I could just save them just in case. So it's really, really useful. But probably the most useful thing about all of this is that my developers and me will always know without looking which files I've got to edit, and we're following a clearly documented methodology. So I will know where to find things and they will know where to find things. We won't have to look for things. And in 1 year's time, when we come back to this project and a client asks us to do some more work, we will automatically know what it looks like because all of our projects look like this. So this is the components. So just to talk you through it, I've got buttons as a component. And buttons may also be part of another component, but you would just write the button component. And if you said the card needs to have a different type of button, you may do, and I would probably keep it in the buttons CSS, and I would do like card.card.button or whatever it is. As to show you what some of the others are, our hero, we've got that as a component. Meet the team, we've got as a component. Again, potentially that could be a layout, but I consider it a component. We've got a menu sidebar, so if we look at this page, here's our sidebar menu. It's completely different from the main menu, so we've made a component for it. And the key thing here is that it's really, really maintainable. Not only can I just remove any of these files at any time, but I also have only the CSS relating to that in that file. The file is a description of what it does, and inside of it is only CSS for that particular component. It makes maintenance a breeze. It makes it really easy for me and my team to do it. But even if I work on my own, I still follow this process because in 1 year's time, when I can't remember where the CSS is, that's a nightmare. If I'm thinking, oh, if I edit this, is it going to break something? What's it going to do? This methodology stops all of that from happening. So finally, moving on to pages. Pages I see used a lot incorrectly. Pages should be overrides. So my components for my buttons should not be in the home page. They should be in the components page. Only if the home page has totally different buttons, I might consider doing something here. But even then, I would probably just make a home page class, and in the buttons component, I would probably just do a home.buttons. So I know that it's always in the buttons. But in some cases, so for example, here, if I show you, in this case, we've got p home because we know that's the page, and we've got the hero and we've got the h1. So actually, it's kind of like we're overriding the hero section, and it's just the h1. So all we're saying is on the home page, the h1 is bigger than all of the other pages. All the other pages is exactly the same, but on the home page it's different. So rather than writing that in the component, we'll write that on the pages for the home page. So my point is, most of the time you don't need to write lots and lots of stuff in here. It's just if there's an override only on that page. So the hero should be styled in the components or in the layouts, and the home page override is just for the home page. So you shouldn't be having a CSS file for every single page. On the whole, say you have a different color card on the home page to the other pages. That probably belongs in the cards component, and probably because the home page isn't the thing that makes it different. It could be you. Say you've got a card on the home page, it's a red card, the rest of the page is a white card. Well, probably that goes in the card component, and instead of calling it homepage card, you call it red card or white card. And that way, if in the future the client says to me, I love that red card, can we use it on the contact page as well? Well, straight away I just add one to the contact page and I call it red card and the CSS is there. Otherwise, I'm going to have to call it homepage card and it won't make sense anymore. So it's just about thinking about naming conventions and reusability and how all of these things work. So that's it basically. The only thing I want to touch on as well is having a solid framework. So the BEM framework is kind of a useful one. You should look it up, but it's basically like a naming convention, and it's called block element modifier. That's what the BEM stands for. So this is class block, and as you can see, this is a modifier. So now we've got block underscore element. So this is like you have your button, and then you might have button underscore red. So now that button's different. So that's the element, and then the modifier. Sorry, the modifier would probably be red. So you can see here it's got dash dash size big, dash dash shadow yes. So it's just having a naming convention where you say, actually, here's the thing, and here's what we do, and if we want to make like 3 different versions of it, we just add the modifier. So by having this naming convention, um, what happens is all of my team is using the same thing. Because we're all using the same thing, we are very consistent with our styling, our naming. That means it's really maintainable in the future. It means if I'm looking for at a CSS class, I know what it does straight away. I know it's just modifying it. And so if it's like dash dash red, I know that it's like the same as the other one, but this one's red. So it's really, really easy to keep up with. And it doesn't matter if you follow BEM or a different methodology or you make up your own way of doing things. What matters is that you're consistent, even if you're on your own. But if you're in a team, especially, everybody needs to have a document which says, this is how we do it. And, it doesn't matter why we do it. It just matters that we all do the same thing. So I'm a really, really big fan of naming conventions. So part of the naming conventions for 7 to 1, we always have the same folder names. We always have like very descriptive names of the components so we know what we're doing. Menu sidebar is obviously a menu in a sidebar. Navigation is obviously navigation. So it's really, really obvious what you'll be looking at before you even open the file. And once you're in the file, you've got the BEM methodology, which will really keep your team on point. So I hope that helps you. It's a long way away from when I first started with a big long CSS file with all of my content in it, and I was scared to delete things because I wasn't really sure what it affected. Now I know pretty much what it affects because it's always in this small little file, and obviously I'm a better coder, so I remember to delete things as I'm going along and making changes. But I hope that helps you. I hope it shows you how to be maintainable in 1 year's time when you look back in your projects, how to work in a team, and also the fact that you could just comment out files and the customer changes their mind and then changes it back again. Who's had a customer like that? You can easily save your code and come back to it and just add it back in if you need to. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.